Additionally, I performed a reverse address search on the address Lou used while in Palm City. I discovered that a person named Larry Powers had resided at this address as well. As Powers is Lou's wife Jennifer's maiden name, I wondered if there was any family connection between Jennifer and this Larry Powers. A web search for Larry Powers in the Palm City, Florida area revealed an obituary dated 2015. Larry seems to have been a very well respected, loved, and missed person who touched many lives in a positive way. Larry enjoyed boating and his family time. He was a longtime resident of the Jupiter, Florida area, and Larry was also a longtime employee of Lockheed Martin Industries, working for 26 years in some form of satellite engineering and project management positions. Jupiter, Palm City, and Hopa Sound, Florida are all within about a 20-minute drive of one another. And I would also like to point out that Lou and his wife have ties to this area, as they had both resided in Hopa Sound previously when they gave birth to their daughter back in 1996. And while I mentioned that there are no nearby military installations that I can find in the area, a search of LockheedMartinJobs.com shows many jobs in the Palm City, Jupiter area of Florida. So I think it is safe to assume that there is a strong defense industry presence in this area of Florida. However, after an exhaustive search of internet archives, I was unable to locate any birth records for Miss Jennifer Powers Elizondo, and as such could neither confirm nor exclude any direct relationship with Larry Powers, the longtime Lockheed Martin employee. I should also mention at this point that during the course of this investigation, I was unable to locate a marriage certificate for Lou and Jennifer Elizondo as well. And as none of the states that they have resided in have common law marriage laws in place, I have to question if these two are even legally married. It seems a trivial point. However, it makes me wonder why two people would represent themselves to the world as man and wife when it appears that they are not. And just to be perfectly clear, all of these facts might be purely coincidental or explained in a rational way. However, in the scope of this documentary, I felt that they had to be mentioned because this won't be the last time that the name of the Lockheed Martin Corporation pops up during the delve into the question of who's Lou? This brings us to March of 2004, when Lou and his wife packed their bags and they sold the family home in Georgia and moved to Stevensville, Maryland. Stevensville is a suburban part of Maryland on Kent Island. It is located less than a 45-minute drive away from both Baltimore and Washington, D.C. For the next 2 years, Lou and Jennifer would rent a house in Stevensville before buying a permanent residence in 2006.
The Pentagon, and ATIP. After several assignments in the Middle East, I was assigned to Washington, D.C. as the Overseas Investigations Desk Officer. There, I had the responsibility of managing foreign intelligence and terrorist investigations worldwide. Over the next several years, I worked within a variety of intelligence agencies and organizations.
It is unclear exactly what Lou was doing during this time at the Pentagon. However, Lou described it on his webpage as working as an overseas investigations desk officer. In this bureaucratic role at the Pentagon, Lou vaguely states that he worked within a variety of intelligence agencies and organizations. However, just like in the case of Lou's previous Army experience, the only verifiable information that I could find about his career up to this point was his own statement on his official webpage and the single accompanying photo that Lou had titled Korea 1. There is zero verifiable evidence to support Lou's statement here beyond his own words and a photo that he has provided. Just like every other portrayal of Lou's life, the source is Lou Elizondo himself. So here we have yet another unanswered question. Is this all true, or is it simply an embellished war story? Who's Lou? In 2007, Lou apparently was feeling creative again, and he would file for another patent with the US Patent Office. This time, the science major applied for another nautical patent. This one was titled Interchangeable Superstructures and Hulls for Ocean-Going Vessels. It is clear that this patent belongs to Lou and not his father, as it lists his Stevensville address. The patent is for an interchangeable ship hull on a commercial transport vessel. This patent has a long and complicated history and will keep popping up again later in Lou's life. And I will be mentioning it again later, so keep this patent for an interchangeable boat hull in mind, and we will move along to 2008.
In 2008, I was asked to be part of the now famous Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP. In 2010, as a staff member for the Office of the Secretary of Defense, I assumed the lead role for this endeavor. Our mission was to conduct scientific-based intelligence investigations of incursions by unidentified aerial phenomenon into controlled U.S. airspace.
In 2008, according to Lou, he was asked to join the now infamous ATIP program at the Pentagon. There would be much speculation, opinion, questions, investigation, and obfuscation surrounding the exact nature of the ATIP program and of Lou's involvement in it over the years. In fact, it is still a matter of debate to this day. I'm not going to be spending too much time talking about the program here, as that could be a whole documentary of its own. However, there are a few points worth mentioning. After Lou left the Department of Defense and joined TTSA in late 2017, the mainstream media largely characterized Lou as the Pentagon's UFO man.
Until he stepped out on stage last October alongside rock star Tom DeLonge and other former government insiders, most of the world had never heard of Luis Elizondo, which is how he liked it. Elizondo's government career was spent in the shadows, mostly as a Pentagon intelligence officer.
I was at the top of my game in my career field, and I left it all to have this conversation with the American public.
The conversation is about UFOs. For almost 10 years, Elizondo was a central figure in a secret Pentagon program to study unknown aerial threats. These days, he's preparing to relocate to the sleepy beach town of Encinitas, which is where Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy is based. That organization made public a pair of UFO videos which Elizondo helped to declassify before he left Washington.
If you Google the term ATIP, you will see that there are thousands of news articles about the program. Most of these articles refer to Lou as the Pentagon's UFO top dog or the Pentagon UFO whistleblower. However, you will notice that the vast majority of these articles are sourced solely on statements made by Lou himself or point back to the original TTSA press release.
Hello, I'm Tom DeLonge, and thanks for joining us live today.
Or George Knapp's article and broadcast later that day, with zero supporting evidence of fact. All of these articles pass the research and verification aspect of this story on to the original authors, TTSA and Lou Elizondo, in some sort of strange journalistic version of passing the research buck in a circle while perpetuating a UFO whistleblower narrative, which all came back to Lou Elizondo and his word.
Known as UFOs.
What about those UFO videos?
Well, remember the UFO videos?
UFOs, unknown technology.
UFO study.
UFOs, UFO videos, UFO incidents,
The UFO, 24 UFO videos are
official UFO videos, UFO encounters, other UFOs.
Oh, it's always so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, George.
I have spent the last few years looking for official documents pertaining to ATIP and what its function was. However, I have found very little. Here is most of what I've been able to locate. The first piece that we have are the leaked ATIP slides that were located on Christopher Mellon's official website. After these slides were discovered and revealed to the public, they were promptly removed from Mellon's official webpage, but not before copies were made. These slides describe the ATIP program in detail. The purpose of ATIP is described as a reporting program that would observe a certain issue and report an assessment of status and recommendations for that particular situation. These sorts of reporting programs are fairly common inside the military structure to give a high-ranking official a quick overview, analysis, and possible solution for any given situation or issue. For example, such reporting groups could be tasked with identifying and making recommendations on a myriad of military topics ranging from supply chain issues to personnel restructuring. The issue at hand that ATIP was tasked with is described here under its mission: to further identify, understand, and take advantage of a generation of highly advanced technologies and principles that may be currently employed by other countries, actors, or entities, and use this technology to the benefit of the department and provide the United States with a decisive advantage over adversaries and threats. The last part of this statement clearly means that whatever technology was identified by ATIP would be evaluated as to its military application value. So let's look at the first part of this mission statement. Quote, to further identify, understand, and take advantage of highly advanced technologies and principles that may be currently employed by other countries, actors, or entities. End quote. You will notice there is nothing about UFOs or flying saucers, nothing about aliens or alien technologies, nothing about off-world craft, and nothing about UAP. However, there is something about other countries, actors, or entities, which leads me to conclude that ATIP was most likely not a UFO or UAP program at all, but was a program to study the potential advanced top secret technologies possessed by foreign countries that may become an adversary, such as China or Russia. TTSA also released a near 30-minute video called Lou Elizondo Presents ATIP. In this entire video, Lou never once mentions the word UFO and only says UAP one time here in this clip.
So let's go into a little bit about what ATIP is. ATIP evolved from OSAP. That is absolutely true. OSAP existed for a short period of time under another director to focus on the UAP specific capabilities and concentrated on the what and how interrogatives. Not the who, not the when, but what is it and how does it work? That's it.
In the context of that clip, Lou was talking about objects that might have unknown flight characteristics and what those UAP properties might be, which makes perfect sense if ATIP was about tracking foreign countries' advanced weapons programs, but makes no sense if ATIP was about studying UFOs and UAP. The only reason that I mention all of this in this documentary is because to this day, despite the volume of evidence supporting the fact that ATIP was a foreign threat assessment program and not a UFO program, people all over the world continue to believe and to cite as fact the media news spectacle that ensued later when Mr. Elizondo would leave the Pentagon and join TTSA.
Well, remember the UFO videos released by the Pentagon? It was late last year. Apparently, there are still more lurking in the military files.
In fact, a man who spent 10 years working on the government's secret study of UFOs.
Elizondo spent 10 years as head of a secret study of unidentified aerial objects.
A secret Pentagon program to study unknown aerial objects, otherwise known as UFOs.
What about those UFO videos?
All of this truly makes me wonder what the ATIP program was actually about and what it was not. I guess we'll have to add this to the list of unanswered questions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? In addition to the leaked ATIP slides, I also found this redacted list of ATIP members in 2009 that shows Lou and one other DoD employee answered to the director of ATIP at the time, along with 8 levels of bureaucrats ending in the Secretary of Defense. The document also shows that ATIP consisted of the director, Lou, and one other unidentified government employee. There's also a list at the bottom of 3 named contractors, 2 of which were redacted, and the last name being Dr. Hal Puthoff of Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BASS. So this clearly shows that ATIP was a small office somewhere in the Pentagon that consisted of only 2 to 3 people and a few contractors. And Lou's involvement was only from the years of 2008 to 2012, 2 years as a junior member and 2 years as the director of ATIP. This program was clearly not some massive, top-secret UFO program as it was portrayed in the media.
In fact, a man who spent 10 years working on the government's secret study of UFOs.
Elizondo spent 10 years as head of a secret study of unidentified aerial objects, UFOs.
Oh, it's always so fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks, George.
Here's another piece of concrete evidence that I discovered. A 2009 letter from Senator Harry Reid about ATIP that indicates that the program was not about UFOs or UAP, but was instead mandated to, quote, assess far-term foreign advanced aerospace threats to the United States, end quote. This again suggests that the program was about monitoring advanced foreign aerospace threats. You will notice that the letter from Senator Reid makes no mention of aliens, alien life, or an alien threat. The document says nothing about monitoring advanced outer space threats, while it does mention monitoring advanced aerospace threats. This is a very important point because, as I mentioned earlier, ATIP was characterized in the mainstream media as a Pentagon UFO program.
Well, remember the UFO videos?
UFOs, unknown technology.
UFO study.
UFOs, UFO videos, UFO incidents.
The UFO, 24 UFO videos are being declassified for release to the public in the coming months.
While it appears that ATIP seems to have been mandated to be a program to investigate foreign countries' advanced technologies, and the whole time Lou allowed it to be misportrayed in the media as such, when there is zero evidence to support the claim that ATIP was anything more than what it appears on paper, a foreign technology study. And what was it that Lou said before?
So let's go into a little bit about what ATIP is. ATIP evolved from OSAP to focus on the UAP-specific capabilities and concentrated on the what and how interrogatives. Not the who, not the when, but what is it and how does it work? That's it.
I find it hard to believe that if ATIP were indeed a UFO investigation study, the U.S. military would not be extremely interested in finding out where these so-called UFOs were coming from. So this further supports the theory that ATIP was indeed about foreign advanced threats, and if the technology that they possessed could be employed by the U.S. military, and that ATIP was not about UFOs. There is one final point to mention before we move on past ATIP, and that is that due to the controversy surrounding Lou's role in the program and precisely what the program entailed, in 2021, former Senator Harry Reid, who originally sponsored the ATIP program, released a document to the press. This statement was extremely vague and seemed to only confirm that some unnamed program that would later be called ATIP had a budget of what appears to be $22 million, and Mr. Lou Elizondo had served in the program for an undisclosed amount of time in a role of leadership. I am a little suspect of Mr. Reid's statements here for several reasons, such as the senator's long involvement with the ATIP program, the fact that the senator was retired and held no official position with the U.S. government at the time of the writing, and the fact that the senator faced zero liability if this statement was found to be untrue. However, you will have to determine for yourself how credible this letter is with zero supporting evidence. That is all of the factual evidence that I could dig up on ATIP. Everything else was sourced back to Lou Elizondo himself or sourced back to other reporters who were sourced back to Lou. Such pieces are opinionated in nature while lacking supporting factual evidence, and as such, cannot be counted on for any form of truth. And that is all of the information that I have about ATIP. If you want an in-depth review of the ATIP program and its predecessor OSAP, John Greenwald at the Black Vault has been vigorously following the story from day one and recently did a very articulate and thorough review of the whole program. I would recommend that you watch it as it will explain the whole issue in detail. Outside of his job at the Pentagon, not much is known about Lou's personal life during this time frame. We do know from public filings that in 2010, Lou's wife Jennifer had to file Chapter 13 bankruptcy for some reason. As mentioned previously, an exhaustive nationwide search of marriage records failed to reveal a marriage certificate for Lou and Jen, and so it is unknown if Lou was personally affected by the bankruptcy. However, it does appear from the property records on the family home in Stevensville, which was in both Lou and Jen's name at the time, that they were fortunately able to keep their home separated from the bankruptcy, as they would not sell that property until several years later. Shortly before the bankruptcy, Lou would again try his hand as an inventor and a businessman. In the newspaper archives, I was able to locate an article that appeared in January 2010 describing a business venture that Lou had started with a friend of his by the name of John Robert. The article describes how Lou and Mr. Robert had been pals since meeting in the Army in 1996. Mr. Robert moved to Kent Island in 2005, a year after Lou did, and the two commuted to work together across the Bay Bridge from Kent Island into mainland Maryland. Every day on the way to work, they would see ships lying at anchor, and they wanted to come up with a process for ships to have a faster turnaround time as they landed in port and waited for paperwork to clear inspections for damage before finally being allowed to dock and unload. And so apparently this gave them an idea to start a company called Never Ship Empty Incorporated. In the article, they show a Never Ship Empty logo, and they state that the company is in talks with the Port of Baltimore in order to discuss the port signing on as the initial test port. And all of this right in the middle of Lou's ATIP work and the year he was promoted to director of ATIP. He found the time to start a business with another desk agent who he commuted with. However, just like all of Lou's stories, there's just one small problem. The business that Lou told this journalist existed, Never Ship Empty Incorporated, would have been more appropriately called Never Existed Incorporated, because a state-specific search at the Maryland Secretary of State LLC entity lookup showed no such entity has ever existed in the state of Maryland. An additional nationwide business search in the name of Never Ship Empty Incorporated and of John Robert's full birth name, Lou Elizondo, and his full birth name all failed to show a business named Never Ship Empty Incorporated in any state. Never Ship Empty Incorporated simply never existed. Who's Lou? The article also mentions a patent that Lou and his partner had received. However, I was unable to find a patent for Never Ship Empty at the patent office in 2010. And so just like Lou's company, the patent also did not exist. I did, however, discover that during this time, Lou was modifying his interchangeable boat hull patent and resubmitting it to the patent office. And he was then issued a patent in February of 2009. You will notice again on this patent that Lou is listed as the sole inventor, and note that this patent was issued several months before the Never Ship Empty article was printed. So this makes me wonder, How was this article printed, fact-checked, and passed by a newspaper editor when the main facts of the story, the company, and the patent appear to have never existed? How can Lou explain telling the writer of this article that a company and a patent existed when there is no record of them? Was anything in this article factual? Was this all just another get-rich-quick scheme with no real-world application? Or was it a sincere business venture made by a man who was allegedly the Pentagon's UFO hunter at the time? I guess these are just a few more of the unanswered questions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? Elsewhere in the world in 2011, Lou's mother Janice would sadly pass away. And over in Immokalee, Florida, later that year, it seems that Lou's father would come into some money because he would pay off his mortgages in full, and then he sold off 3 parcels of land to a nonprofit organization. The 3 lots appear to be a parking lot that is across the street from the building owned by the NPO. So I presume the lots were rented to the NPO before this. But in 2012, Lou's father would sell one of his sources of income to this nonprofit organization for the sum of $10. And I have to question as to why anyone would sell a property to a nonprofit organization for $10. Why not sell the property for the tax assessed value? That way you can claim the donation as a tax write-off. This makes no sense unless you are not worried about tax write-offs, which implies that you are financially secure. I did, however, find that Lou Sr. had actually purchased the lots originally from someone for a sum of $10 as well. So I think that maybe in the past, somebody did Lou Sr. a favor and sold him these properties for cheap. And that by selling the properties to the NPO for $10, perhaps Lou Sr. was paying back the favor. Or maybe not. I don't know. But what I do know is that Lou's father sold off a revenue stream for next to nothing. And people simply don't do that unless they can afford to. It might just be a coincidence or it might not, as it is unclear exactly where the money came from. However, in the context of this documentary, I felt that it was important to include this information. Meanwhile, back in Maryland, according to Lou, sometime in 2010, he was promoted to the director position of ATIP, where he would remain for the next 2 years until 2012, when ATIP was officially ended. Even the ending of the ATIP program would not distract Lou from his goal of becoming a successful inventor. It appears that in that same year as ATIP was ending, Lou was modifying his patent for his interchangeable boat hull once again. This whole ordeal was a long and complicated process spanning over 6 years and required refiling and modifying the patent 4 separate times. This final version of the patent looked much the same as all the rest he had filed over the years, except for one small but extremely significant detail. In this version of Lou's patent, there was a long list of nautical patents that were referenced in the filing. The first patent listed was issued back in 2007 to a Terrence Schmidt, who was a master shipbuilder employed by Lockheed Martin at the time. Currently, Mr. Schmidt is the co-owner in a private company called Inmar Technologies that makes boats and aquatic features that employ declassified versions of Lockheed Martin technology. A biography on Mr. Schmidt from the Inmar Technologies webpage shows that he was employed by Lockheed Martin for 31 years, where he received 14 patents. Mr. Schmidt holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Aeronautical Engineering and a Master's degree in Mechanical Engineering, and conducted wind tunnel testing at NASA for 6 years. Mr. Schmidt is exactly the sort of person that you would expect to design a nautical patent. He has the credentials for it, he has the experience for it, and he has the knowledge for it. And I would just like to point out a couple of things here. First, Lou Elizondo received a single bachelor's degree with a double major in microbiology and immunology from Miami University in 1995. Additionally, this patent was originally filed in 2006, not long before Lou was assigned to ATIP. Now, let me ask this. How does a guy with a science degree come up with these nautical patents that Lou is claiming as inventor? And why did Lou reference a 2007 patent given to Lockheed Martin in his patent filing? And why did all of this happen right about or before the time that Lou joined ATIP? Is it all simply coincidence? Because to me, all of this circumstantial evidence certainly gives the appearance that Lou had some sort of involvement with Lockheed Martin engineers as early as 2007 and continuing until at least 2012. Why else would he be citing Lockheed Martin patents in his own patent applications? And this makes me wonder, did Lou meet some sort of a Lockheed Martin representative in 2007 or before who helped coach him on nautical patents so that they could pay to use those patents in some form of what the Uniform Code of Military Justice under Article 124B defines as a graft? This is a very serious and extremely alarming unanswered question that has come up when we ask, who's Lou? During the course of this investigation, I reached out for a comment to Mr. Schmidt, who was listed in the 2007 Lockheed Martin patent. Mr. Schmidt failed to respond to my request. And that brings us to 2014, 2 years after ATIP has ended, and over 4 years after the Never Ship Empty article was printed describing the non-existent company that Lou and John Robert allegedly formed. Lou had finalized his interchangeable boat hull patent and in the process added John Robert and John's brother Atmar as second and third co-inventors. I have no idea why Lou would add a second and third party to his patent as co-inventors at this point, nor could I speculate as to why he waited over 4 years to file a patent with the co-founder of a non-existent company called Never Ship Empty Incorporated. Nor could I tell you how Lou found time to do all of this while he was working full-time at the Pentagon. Add all of these to the list of unanswered questions that we get when we ask, who's Lou? After ATIP was shut down, we don't know exactly what Lou was doing for the Department of Defense officially. There were rumors about work at Guantanamo Bay, which led John Greenwald at the Black Vault to ask Lou this.
You know, you do have those security oaths and NDAs and clearances where you can't talk about it. And that was what was very evident to me about that office, because there was very little to dig up. And trust me, I've tried since 2000, whatever it was, when that
I have no doubt, John.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
But it was those Navy court transcripts that came up, and I won't push you on it because I know it is sensitive and I know it's still ongoing. But for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to reference your office in October of 2017, it's clear that whatever you were doing within that office was in dealing with special access programs and also giving what appeared from the transcripts, the translator for Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, access to the information for him to properly translate for the defense. And there was a problem with the judge because they had lost their SAP access. So for me to see that, again, away from the ATIP story, that made me realize a couple of years ago, okay, this guy was into, you know, some highly classified material programs, and obviously the one that was spearheading that effort for others to gain access to those special access programs.
Well, that's honestly, John, what landed me on the naughty boy list with ISIS and Al Qaeda. That I was informed that I was wound up being put on the kill list, which was not a very good day in the Elizondo household. I can assure you. Fortunately for me, I just wound up on being on some sort of kill list where other people actually, lost their lives. So yeah. I'm definitely not saying that the line of work was
anything more dangerous than anybody else, but it did put me in a situation where it still is technically. I'm still, on that naughty list, if you will.
There is zero evidence to support Lou's allegation that he was or currently is on some sort of a hit list, at least that I was able to uncover. But then again, terrorist organizations do not necessarily keep a wanted list like the FBI does on a website. However, he was a career intelligence officer up until that point, with some form of a security clearance, so I don't find it too difficult to believe that he may have been sent on an assignment to Guantanamo Bay Prison. It seems logical as he was cleared for such a high-level intelligence operation, and Lou's role at the Special Access Program management staff would have most likely given him time for such a side assignment. We just have no way of knowing for sure unless there is some documentation to support his claims. However, I do find the claim questionable, as Lou would state publicly on live streams what state he was living in.
If I get pissed off enough, man, last thing I want to do is get back into the fray of things. I need that like a hole in the head. I just want to be left alone and retire. There's a reason why I live in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming.
And a simple search of the internet would reveal Lou's current address. So I have to seriously doubt if Mr. Elizondo was ever on any sort of a hit list, or if this is just another one of his grandiose war stories.
Well, that's honestly, John, what landed me on the naughty boy list with ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
I guess we'll just have to add this one to the long list of unanswered questions that arise when we ask, who's Lou?
In 2017, with a heavy heart, I resigned from my position inside the Pentagon in an effort to raise awareness of the UAP issue. The decision to resign was based on my sense of loyalty to the Secretary and my beloved department, in order to dismantle the bureaucratic silos and stovepipes hindering the conversation about this important topic.
October 4th, 2017. Lou Elizondo tendered his resignation from the Department of Defense. Lou cited a myriad of vague, unsubstantiated allegations at the Pentagon as the cause and then quit. 1 week later, on October 11th, 2017, Lou was on the stage with Tom DeLonge in Seattle, Washington. They stood on a stage in an empty auditorium and issued a statement in a staged press conference that included exactly 0 press members and was televised to the world. Listen to this clip and notice that you can hear every sound in the auditorium, indicating that it is empty. And pay attention to how Lou looks around while he is speaking, as if the room is full of journalists that he is speaking to, when in reality, this was an empty room.
Hello, I'm Tom DeLonge, and thanks for joining us live today. I want to take a second here. Months ago, I had some very important people from inside the government talking about somebody that one day I would possibly be able to meet. And I remember the words were, you can't know his name, but if you were ever to know his name, you would have to keep that to yourself till the day you die. And then I remember there was a big breakthrough where we started referring to this guy by the letter L. Days ago, this person finished his career at the Department of Defense as one of the senior covert intelligence officers in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. I think you need to really listen carefully to what he says. And I still, even working our way up to today, I get the chills when you say it. So I want you to all meet Lou Elizondo.
Well, thanks, Tom, for that very special introduction. My name is Lou Elizondo, and as a career intelligence officer, I am accustomed to being involved in close-hold, nuanced programs involving national security. This includes being a counterintelligence special agent, a case officer, and an intelligence practitioner. However, by far the most interesting effort I was involved with was the topic of advanced aerial threats. For nearly the last decade, I ran a sensitive aerospace threat identification program focusing on unidentified aerial technologies. It was in this position I learned that the phenomenon is indeed real.
This truly makes me wonder if TTSA had something to fear by answering questions about the claims made in such an uncontrolled setting. However, I could only speculate why anyone would schedule such a staged press event. I guess you would have to ask Tom DeLonge why they failed to invite a single member of the press to the so-called press release. And here we have just one more contradiction that surrounds the question of who's Lou? But before we talk about the TTSA, we need to talk about exactly how and when Lou resigned from the military, and exactly what he was up to in the final months leading up to his resignation. There are some very important details that we need to cover. Listen to this clip where Lou is talking with John Greenwald about when he first left the Pentagon and joined TTSA in October 2017.
As far as meeting Tom DeLonge, it wasn't until afterwards. Actually, once I resigned is when I was approached to say, hey, Lou, there's this little organization over here led by some guy, some rock star, which if we met now, don't hold me to it, but I mean, we're going back 3 years now.
Sure.
I'm pretty certain it was Jim who actually was the one to offer me a position.
Pre-resignation or post, just for chronological?
No, post.
No, gotcha. Post. I gotcha.
Lou has publicly stated that he had never heard of or met Tom DeLonge and that he had not been extended an opportunity to work with TTSA before he resigned from the Pentagon. However, I find that extremely hard to believe for a few reasons. First, Tom DeLonge admitted himself that he and his colleagues at TTSA had been discussing Lou Elizondo for months before he joined the company.
I want to take a second here. Months ago, I had some very important people from inside the government talking about somebody that one day I would possibly be able to meet.
Additionally, in early 2017, Tom DeLonge teased the upcoming TTSA release while he was receiving an award from Open Minds TV.
And I'm making really good progress. I can't tell you what I'm about to announce. If you look at my social media, at least on my Instagram, you'll see that I said there's going to be an announcement in within the next 60-ish days.
And here is one more alarming and contradictory fact. Public records for Lou's wife showed that Jennifer P. Elizondo rented an apartment in Encinitas, California that was a 6-minute drive from the TTSA headquarters, and that she had rented this apartment sometime in 2016, at least 11 months before Lou retired from the Pentagon. This seems to follow the Elizondo's pattern of living near Lou's workspace and one member of the household moving to set up a new home before the other joins them later. And it also seems to indicate Lou's prior intentions to join the TTSA almost a year before he quit the Pentagon, as there is simply no other logical explanation for his wife moving so close to the TTSA headquarters almost a year before Lou left the Pentagon. Another fact that seems to indicate that Lou was planning the move to TTSA before leaving the Pentagon is this document dated April 26, 2017, almost 6 months before Lou retired from the Pentagon. This document shows that Lou had sold the family home in Stevensville in preparation for his resignation from the Department of Defense and him joining the TTSA. And here are two more significant facts that imply that Lou might have been associated with TTSA before his resignation. On August 15th, 2017, over in California, just 10 minutes away from where Lou's wife Jennifer was living, Tom DeLonge of To the Stars Academy filed with the SEC to take his company public. The public venture move was estimated to bring in $20 to $30 million in revenue for the company to invest in its research and development. And just 9 days later, over at the Pentagon, on August 24th, 2017, 4 months after he had sold the family home in Stevensville, and just over a month before Lou would resign from the Department of Defense, Lou filed this request to have 3 pieces of video footage declassified. There are some very important points to note about this request. First, Lou told the Pentagon that the footage was of unmanned aerial vehicles, balloons, and other unmanned aerial systems. The footage is clearly not of UFOs, aliens, UAP, spaceships, flying saucers, or swamp gas. He clearly states that the videos are of drones, balloons, and other UAS. Second, Lou told the Pentagon that the videos were not for publication and were for research and analysis only, with other U.S. government and industry partners for the purpose of developing an identification database. And the final point, all of this was going on in 2017, 5 years after ATIP had officially ended, during which time Lou had other assigned duties at the Pentagon. There is no legitimate reason Lou would have had to request the 3 pieces of footage being declassified at the time that he did. This seriously casts doubts on Lou's motivations, as it suggests that Mr. Elizondo abused his authority and tenure at the DoD to secure the declassification of the videos shortly before his resignation. At some point after this, we know that the footage was indeed declassified and that it was leaked to the public illegally and ended up in the hands of Tom DeLonge and to the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, where, coincidentally, Lou was also employed after leaving the Pentagon. And so I have to ask these questions. If Lou was not collaborating with TTSA and planning to leave the Pentagon for at least 11 months, how can he explain his wife moving to California 10 minutes away from the TTSA headquarters almost a year before he quit? How can Lou explain the hype and promotion by Tom DeLonge in March of 2017, some 9 months before Lou quit the DoD?
Serious shit.
How can Lou explain selling his family home of 13 years over 5 months before he quit the Pentagon? How can Lou explain the obvious financial motivation that it appears he was granted by the TTSA stock offering and by his facilitating the leak of the Gimbal, FLIR, and Go Fast videos? And finally, how can Lou explain filing to have 3 pieces of video footage declassified just over a month before his resignation, and those same 3 pieces of video ending up over at TTSA along with Lou Elizondo himself right after the company began selling a bunch of stocks? All of these will have to be added to the list of unanswered questions and contradictions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? After selling the family home of over a decade, while Jennifer was off in California, Lou would continue to rent a house just down the street where he would reside the last few months until his official resignation. After resigning at the Pentagon, Lou joined his wife in Encinitas, California, and that brings us to October 14th, 2017, and the staged TTSA press event in Seattle, Washington, held in an empty auditorium. It was exactly 7 days after Lou's resignation from the Pentagon, and he had officially been employed by TTSA at this time.
Hello, I'm Tom DeLonge, and thanks for joining us live today.
It was in this position I learned that the phenomena is indeed real.
Within hours of the TTSA event in Seattle, KLAS I-Team investigator George Knapp broke the story online and would begin the narrative of ATIP being about UFOs.
Until he stepped out on stage last October alongside rock star Tom DeLonge and other former government insiders, most of the world had never heard of Luis Elizondo, which is how he liked it. Elizondo's government career was spent in the shadows, mostly as a Pentagon intelligence officer.
I was at the top of my game in my career field, and I left it all to have this conversation with the American public.
The conversation is about UFOs. For almost 10 years, Elizondo was a central figure in a secret Pentagon program to study unknown aerial threats. These days, he's preparing to relocate to the sleepy beach town of Encinitas, which is where Tom DeLonge's To the Stars Academy is based. That organization made public a pair of UFO videos which Elizondo helped to declassify before he left Washington.
George also wrote an online news article that was clearly an op-ed piece and is heavily opinionated about Lou's role in ATIP and what ATIP was. By using the term UFO in the article over a dozen times, Knapp opened the door for the mainstream media to begin its UFO blitz.
Well, remember the UFO videos?
UFOs, unknown technology.
UFO study.
UFOs, UFO videos, UFO incidents.
The UFO, 24 UFO videos are being declassified for release to the public in the coming months.
George Knapp had sparked an online media surge reinforcing the UFO narrative to the public. This one-sided narrative would overwhelm the few people who questioned Lou's dubious claims in an epic wave of propaganda. Many have wondered why Mr. Knapp was so quick to characterize the ATIP program as a UFO program, and have been suspicious of the nature of his relationship with TTSA, as Mr. Knapp had previously published several interviews with Tom DeLonge prior to Lou joining the company in 2017. It would later be revealed that Mr. Knapp had purchased a small quantity of stock in TTSA, while failing to disclose this apparent conflict of interest to the public, calling into question Mr. Knapp's objectivity in his reporting of a company in which he owned stock. And so I guess Mr. Knapp's involvement with TTSA is just going to be another one of the unanswered questions that arises when we ask, who's Lou? Outside of TTSA, in 2018, Lou joined the cast of the History Channel's Unidentified. This move would begin Lou's journey to celebrity status, a status that he enjoys to this day. Seemingly by coincidence, right about this time is where things would finally take off for Lou and his family financially. However, it is unclear exactly where his newfound wealth came from. Some people postulate that the History Channel contract was the source of all the money. Other people speculate that Lou was one of the people in the huge TTSA payday scandal that amounted in the company having a $37.4 million deficit, largely due to its stock incentive program for its employees, of which Lou was one at the time. We really have no way of knowing where the money came from in 2018, but if we take a look at the public records, we can get some kind of an idea about how much money it was. In 2018, Lou and his wife would go on to purchase a couple of new properties. The first in West Virginia appears to be a nice little place in the country, valued at about $170,000. It is unknown if the property was purchased outright with cash or on a mortgage. Only Lou could answer that. But there is something strange about this property purchase that I noticed as well. It's unclear exactly when Lou and his wife purchased this property. The sales history shows that the transaction took place on December 14th, 2016, 11 months before Lou left the Pentagon and right about the same time that Jennifer moved to Encinitas to be near the TTSA headquarters. But the parcel history shows that the old owners actually paid the 2017 taxes, but it looks like they used Lou and Jennifer's old address in Stevensville, Maryland, as a mailing address. And during that time, you can also see that the improvement value for the home grew by close to $100,000 as well between 2016 and 2018. So it also appears that there were improvements made to this property during that time and a real estate wealth gain of $100,000. Why someone would do all of this is beyond me. Perhaps it was to avoid detection of the purchase of this property and the improvements as some sort of a tax scam. Or perhaps it was just a simple bookkeeping error. Either way, as it appears that Mr. and Mrs. Elizondo may have purchased a property and paid the taxes on it while keeping it listed in the old owner's name, I really have to question the legality of such an action. And so I have to ask, when exactly did Lou and his wife purchase this West Virginia home and for how much? And if it was before he left the Pentagon, how did they pay for this property and the improvements? I guess we'll just have to add all these to the list of unanswered questions and contradictions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? The house in West Virginia was not the only property that the Elizondos purchased in 2018. In September, Lou and Jen also bought a piece of land in Ramona, California. The sale price was just under $800,000, and you can tell by the amount of the VA loan on the home that Lou and Jen put approximately 10% down, or roughly $80,000 cash. What exactly Lou was doing in Ramona is anyone's guess, but I can only assume that from September 2018 on, Mr. Elizondo was having problems with Tom DeLong and the others over at To the Stars Academy. And just like when Lou left the Pentagon, his exit strategy was already planned and implemented before his partner even knew there was trouble. At this point in time, Lou was still officially a part of the TTSA, but it also appears that he had some form of business in the San Diego area, as the Ramona address is about a half-an-hour drive from the city. The question is, what business could Lou Elizondo have in San Diego in late 2018? San Diego is full of military installations and DoD contractors and support businesses and facilities. However, Elizondo was no longer employed by the U.S. government at this time, and he had clearly burnt any bridges that he may have had left in the Pentagon with his TTSA theatrics. So I have to wonder who exactly Lou was attempting to do business with in the San Diego area during this time frame while he finished out his final days at TTSA. There are numerous Lockheed Martin and subsidiary companies in the San Diego area, so I can only assume that it was some sort of defense industry contractor that Lou was trying to do business with, as the city is full of those sorts of businesses. But of course, only Lou could tell us for sure. I guess that this is yet another unanswered question that we get when we ask, who's Lou? Whatever it was that Lou was up to in San Diego seemed to come to an end in January 2021, when Lou would then sell his Ramona, California home. And just like every other aspect of Lou's public life, there's something odd about this transaction as well. You can tell by the tax assessments that the value of the home stayed at around $800,000 for the time that Lou lived in the home. However, when they sold the home, the buyers paid an additional $200,000 over the tax-assessed property value. Now, at first that seemed awfully suspicious to me, but I may have some form of an answer here. While running down a lead earlier in the investigation that ultimately ended up being a dead end, I was looking at some satellite imagery of the Elizondo property, and I noticed that there was an RV parked in the parking space outside the house. So maybe Lou sold the RV along with the home to justify the extra $200,000 paid over market. I've actually heard of such things like that happening before in real estate transactions, so it's possible. However, while I was running the same lead down, I came upon two more relevant points. One was a rumor that I had heard that Lou had been in the Florida area in 2018 during his time with TTSA, which I simply could not confirm, and as such could simply be a rumor. And second, while I was running a nationwide business search on Lou Elizondo, I found a business started in Orlando, Florida, the same year that Lou bought this home in California. The business was called K&K Tile Services. There are two registered owners to the business currently. One is a person named Sarai Alonso, and the other is Luis Elizondo. In an effort to learn more about this business, I attempted to contact everyone named Sarai Alonso in the Orlando area and received no responses, which was strange. And another strange thing about this company is that the registered place of business is a condominium. And so I really wasn't able to figure out much about this K&K Tile. In fact, all I could tell you about the company is that it was started in 2018, just days before Lou purchased his California home, and that the owners' names are Luis Elizondo and Sarai Alonso. But that's all I could tell you about it. I even ran a newspaper archive search for K&K Tile Services and found nothing. But I did find something for Sarai Alonso and Luis Elizondo. I found this birth notice dated 2007, which shows that Sarai Alonso of Orlando had a child with the last name of Elizondo. However, no birth father was given. Lou Elizondo says he has 2 daughters and cites them as his greatest accomplishment, playing the role of devoted father and family man. However, I could only find records for the birth of his first daughter and not his second. Additionally, I could find no record of anyone else living with Lou and Jennifer except the daughter who was born in 1996. Was this child in Orlando Lou's second daughter? And who is the mother of this child? What sort of a relationship do these people have with Lou, his wife, and his other daughter? And there is also the suspicious timing of the business as well. K&K Tile Services was formed on August 27th, 2018. And if you look at the purchase date for Lou and Jennifer's Ramona, California home, the original contract for the sale of the home was dated September 7th, 2018, just days later. This led me to ask, how does a guy who is supposedly working for TTSA find the time to cultivate his next business relationship in San Diego while flying to Florida in 2018 to start a tile business with someone who is obviously not his wife that he may have had a child with back in 2007? It seems that while digging into K&K Tile Services more thoroughly, I may have accidentally stumbled upon the birth notice for Lou's second child and a business that he might have started with the mother of that child, which again is clearly not his wife. But I have no way of knowing for sure. I guess these are just more unanswered questions that we've come across when we ask ourselves, who's Lou? Back in California, in January 2021, Lou and Jennifer completed the sale of the Ramona home. When the property sale was done, it looks like they walked away with about $260,000 cash. If you add in the suspected $100,000 from the West Virginia property, you'll see that you get about $360,000 in real estate and cash profits. Now, I need to interject something right here. I personally find the revealing of such intimate personal, family, and financial information to be distasteful. And I had a serious moral dilemma while trying to decide if I should include this information in the documentary. However, when I saw this clip from January 3rd, 2021, from an interview on the Black Vault with John Greenwald, I felt that this information needed to be included. Watch this clip and bear in mind that this interview on the Black Vault is exactly 10 days before Lou contracted to sell his California home for $260,000 profit.
I got you. So you...
Yeah, because I think they knew that I was going to wind up working at, I got to be careful. Though, I don't want to put a plug in for it. I was going to wind up working, at a probably at a supermarket, just to pay my bills afterwards. Because even though I had left the department, I'm not the age of retirement yet. I can't collect my pension, so I still needed employment.
And later on in the year, Lou would go on to say a similar thing on TMZ when he made allegations that the Pentagon threatened to take away his security clearance.
I was told by a senior representative who was in my chain of command that this whole thing was crazy and it sounded silly and that I better come and talk to him. Otherwise, it will affect my security clearance. And people are going to think I'm crazy. And lo and behold, it turns out that, my security clearance is absolutely now being threatened.
Have they tried to block you from getting a job since you left the Pentagon?
Well, it's a little more sophisticated than that. What they do is they threaten your security clearance. With my background in counterintelligence as in security and former special agent, that's all I'm qualified to do. So they know by cutting that string, in essence, that keeps me from being able to stay employed. And so that's a very clear way of saying, hey, you better mind your manners, you better shut up, otherwise we're going to shut you up.
In both cases, Elizondo is trying to imply that he must maintain his security clearance so that he can work for the defense industry to pay his bills and feed his family.
So with my background in counterintelligence as in security and former special agent, that's all I'm qualified to do.
Yeah, because I think they knew that I was going to wind up working at. I got to be careful. I don't want to put a plug in for it. I was going to wind up working, probably at a supermarket, just to pay my bills afterward.
Less than 2 weeks after making this statement to John Greenwald at the Black Vault, Mr. Elizondo had profited $260,000 from the sale of his home. So I felt that this personal, albeit public, financial information about Lou Elizondo needed to be included, as it directly contradicts Mr. Elizondo's previous public statements that his livelihood was ever in jeopardy. And while I personally know quite a few people who work in service positions, such as actual supermarket clerks,
probably at a supermarket,
none of them are flipping houses for $260,000 profit. So I guess this is just one more of those endless contradictions that you stumble across during your journey into the rabbit hole when you ask, who's Lou? The Elizondo and TTSA partnership would come to an end in late December 2020. There are many rumors about what truly happened at TTSA to cause the key players to quit. Some speculate it was because Tom DeLonge was vocal on social media about his political views. Although I personally do not think that was the case, because a scan of Tom DeLonge's tweets show that before Lou joined TTSA in 2017, Tom was extremely vocal about his political views. But after Lou and the rest of the players joined TTSA, DeLonge actually toned down his public commentary and would keep his political views to himself for a while. At least until after Elizondo and Christopher Mellon quit TTSA. And then Tom would begin his political diatribe up once again, continuing to bash the ex-president. This leads me to believe that while Elizondo and the rest were at TTSA, they were able to control DeLonge enough to get him to stop publicly talking about politics. So it makes no sense to me that they would leave because of DeLonge's tweets if they were able to control those tweets.
You wouldn't have been going to Mars if my opponent won.
Other observers have speculated that the breakup at TTSA was due to the results of the 2020 election, and that whatever plan was underway hinged on a re-election by President Trump. And so the plan was foiled with an unexpected result at the polls.
President Trump is purging the top ranks of the Pentagon.
Meanwhile, President Trump is purging the top ranks of the Pentagon.
Well, Donald Trump still has 70 days to go as president of the United States until the 20th of January. So he can basically still do what he wants and appoint whom he likes. So gone, as you said, is Mark Esper, Jen Stewart, James Anderson, Joseph Kernan. And sources within the Pentagon have been saying, well, this is like a series of beheadings that is taking place within the Pentagon, the White House clearing out the Pentagon of its civilian officials and placing in its own pawns in a bid to make it more political.
There's really no way for us to know for sure what happened over at TTSA to cause the breakup. So I guess we'll just have to add that one to the pile of unanswered questions that have come up during the delve into Who's Lou? For whatever reason, on December 20th, 2020, Lou Elizondo announced that he was officially leaving to the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. But just like in every other part of Lou's life, he never quits one relationship or job until he has another one strategized, planned, and underway.
In late 2020, I decided to focus on disclosure advocacy at the global level, and this is where our journey begins.
3 months before Lou resigned from the TTSA, Lou Elizondo began the first stages of his Plan B and joined Twitter in August 2020. Specifically, he would target a group of sincere UFO and extraterrestrial truth seekers that were bound by a hashtag, UFO Twitter. Lou would join their ranks, making the following promises. 1. I will always tell you the truth. 2. I will own my mistakes and hold myself accountable. 3. Everyone will be treated with respect, no matter their position. 4. Abuse or hatred towards others will not be tolerated. 5. I will always push for full disclosure. I myself used UFO Twitter for about a year or so before Lou joined the scene, and I would like to add a quick personal observation at this point for context. UFO Twitter began after the formation of To the Stars Academy as a pro-TTSA hashtag on Twitter. The group would quickly grow to encompass most mainstream ufology, with such topics as Bob Lazar and Storm Area 51, as well as TTSA news. My personal interaction on UFO Twitter was mostly passive, as I would post occasionally, but I would read it frequently. The overall attitude could become confrontational at times, but the rare arguments seemed to flare out just as quickly as they had started. It was generally an accepting place. However, all of that started to change in August of 2020. Things began to get a bit more polarizing and divisive. Things slowly began getting more drastic, more aggressive, more us versus them thinking. There were more factions and cliques that popped up on the scene, and a central figure emerged from the chaos to crown himself the king of the new UFO order. Lou had taken over. In fact, in this clip right here, he is talking about his rise to celebrity status that began with TTSA, but was solidified on social media.
That's the problem with this community. A lot of people have tried to own the narrative. And now that information is coming out that doesn't comport to their narrative, and frankly, they've made a few bucks on it. They've got a choice: either get on board the new train or fight it and resist it with everything they have. And I think we're seeing that play out to some degree.
Now, that is about as far as I'm going to go with the personal observations and opinions here, as I am trying to keep this documentary as factual as possible. However, I simply wanted to add that piece of context because most people will not understand why a simple hashtag on Twitter is so important. But when you hear this next part, I think it will make more sense. For the previous 2 years, ever since joining To the Stars Academy, Lou had been making the rounds in the mainstream media, hitting such shows as Tucker Carlson, CNN, and 60 Minutes. But those spots and opportunities seemed to slow down and die off as the relationship at TTSA reached its end. So after Lou took over UFO Twitter, as I put it earlier, it didn't take long for him to meet some of the larger YouTube UFO and esoteric livestream channels. And so he began appearing on live streams and doing interviews with select channels within the UFO community. Why did I say select? Because there was a small but vocal minority of people on UFO Twitter and YouTube who questioned the validity of most of Mr. Elizondo's claims. And as I pointed out earlier, the platform had become extremely polarized around the subject of Lou Elizondo. This led to a constant culture where anyone who would question the claims that Lou was making would be swamped with hateful responses, trolling, personal attacks, and general negativity. Of course, none of this came from Lou directly, but he would sit back and watch it happen while saying nothing, and in some cases, even clicking the little heart icon next to the post to love it. But this was a two-pronged attack, where Lou simultaneously engaged and distracted his critics on UFO Twitter, a platform that he controlled. But his real objective was establishing himself in the YouTube community on live streams, on select channels. The select channels with people who he could check out beforehand to see if they were friendly or not to his story. But if they fall into a category that Lou calls haters and are questioning of him, he would decline the interview.
And I think a lot of the pushback that you're getting from the people that you thought would be some of the people you thought would be championing you in the UFO community, and you're getting the brunt of that kinetic nervousness, anxiety, and fear.
Yeah, and that's okay. I get it. Shooting the messenger is an old cliche that's been around a long time, and it's only around because it's happened a lot. My intent, my hope with this conversation is simply just to speak the truth and allow people to absorb what this topic means to them. I've never prescribed a narrative to this. I've never prescribed a motivation or an origin.
Using this scratch and sniff tactic to feel out people and channels before accepting interviews, Lou started at the top, hitting the biggest shows that were friendly and would have him as a guest. This sort of unfiltered access was pivotal for Lou because YouTube channels and live streamers have no content editors or legal departments, as most of them are just like I am, a one-man show. Lou would manipulate this fact to his advantage and use these friendly, unfiltered platforms to go on a spree of live stream appearances while reaching millions of more viewers. But this was always a two-man job, and since Tom DeLonge was out as the public face for his plan, Lou needed someone to replace him. That is where George Knapp came into play once again. Mr. Knapp had been following the TTSA story closely, and he continued to follow Elizondo as well, being the first to break most of the stories concerning Lou. And so George introduced Lou to a man named Jeremy Corbell.
Right. So the Pentagon confirmed that I was able to obtain and release unclassified images and footage with my mentor in journalism, George Knapp.
Jeremy Corbell had recently finished his Bob Lazar Area 51 documentary, which received mixed reviews. And now that Tom DeLonge and the TTSA were out of the picture, that left a hole in the roster, a hole that Jeremy Corbell filled nicely. And now that the team was once again full, these two would head on a talking spree, one more time igniting a mainstream media UFO frenzy.
We take the craft under intelligent control, and they're flying with impunity, Tucker, within our airspace,
that is coming forward.
and they can outmaneuver, outperform anything that we seem to have. Their mode of transportation seems magical to us. It's unbelievable, and now finally we're having a rational, sober discussion about this because we don't know what these are.
Only this new operation was geared around a fiasco that the UFO community called the 180-day Pentagon UFO report. The 180-day report was sold for months in the mainstream media and on social media as a huge step forward for disclosure.
This could be the most consequential thing to happen to this country, to this world, maybe ever. In June, the United States government is set to release a public report on everything it knows about UFOs. Lou Elizondo is the former head of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. He's been on the show a number of times. He just spoke to the New York Post about what that report will show. According to Elizondo, we will find an intelligence failure on the part of the U.S. intel community on the level of 9/11.
In the mainstream media, Elizondo and Corbell spoke endlessly about advanced flight characteristics, physics-defying movement, and a strange unknown threat. I suspect that the media campaign was a way to put pressure on the Pentagon to release something good and juicy in the 180-day report, but it backfired in two ways. First, when the 180-day report was finally delivered, it had a whopping 3 pages of content in it after removing the title pages, indexes, and irrelevant information. The report had such a lackluster response in the UFO community after all the months of hype, it had received the nickname of Nothing Burger. Some folks were speculating that the government was trying to cover things up by using this meager report. Others were speculating that the flimsy 180-day report was a sort of jab in the eye to Elizondo from the Pentagon, because Lou had spent months in the mainstream and on social media trying to pressure the Pentagon into releasing something huge. So they responded with the report that encompassed only data that Elizondo already had access to, as the 180-day report was extremely narrow in scope and began on the same day as the infamous USS Nimitz Tic Tac footage, a piece of footage Elizondo would later have declassified and would wind up at TTSA with him. Regardless of the cause of the 180-day report being so meager, one thing was clear. Despite all of Elizondo and Corbell's attempts to push the 180-day report in the mainstream media, the efforts had failed. But not just failed, they had backfired, because there was a genie that they had let out of the bottle this time: the UFO threat. The problem this time around was that Lou and Jeremy Corbell implied a UFO threat to the narrative.
Anything that we seem to have, their mode of transportation seems magical to us. It's unbelievable. And now finally we're having a rational, sober...
Now, to people who have studied ufology for a while, the story told by Carol Rosen is a familiar one. Rosen was a friend of the late Wernher von Braun, the German scientist that was relocated to the United States after World War II in Operation Paperclip. Von Braun would later go on to be pivotal in the United States space and missile development programs after the war.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosen. In 1974, after being a sixth grade school teacher, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun, in the U.S., the father of rocketry. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies, he said, against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system, the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, and the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat.
Carol Rosen had told von Braun's story of the possibility of a false flag alien attack in the disclosure event coordinated by Dr. Stephen Greer back in 2001. The sudden insertion of this new alien threat in the narrative by Elizondo and Corbell caused grave concern for Dr. Greer, as he saw all the signs of danger that Wernher von Braun had warned us about. This prompted Dr. Greer to publish a free-to-view, crowd-sourced documentary titled The Cosmic Hoax. In the film, Dr. Greer spoke about a variety of UFO and extraterrestrial topics, but he clearly indicated that he felt that Lou Elizondo was part of a military-industrial complex plot and a misinformation agent.
When Unacknowledged went viral and got hundreds of millions of people to see it, within months, they stood up the TTSA with Luis Elizondo, who is a famous disinformation operative in the Pentagon, at least amongst intelligence officials that I've met with, and others who are well-known disinformation figures within the UFO subject. That began the whole process of trying to pull the narrative back to, gee, we don't know what these are, but here's the evidence that we're, quote, leaking, which wasn't a leak, it was a controlled release. And then they hit the button, so the mainstream media that will take dictation from the intelligence community begins to cover it in the New York Times and CNN and every network around the world.
Some people in the UFO community agreed with Dr. Greer, while most of the big names in ufology and others in the community turned on the longtime champion of altruistic disclosure, attacking his body of work and his character in defense of Elizondo. The result was an overwhelming blowback for Lou on social media, where people were challenging the narrative of an alien threat to humanity, calling it petty fear-mongering. At the height of this alien threat fiasco, Dr. Greer publicly challenged Mr. Elizondo to a debate, And the popular UFO YouTube channel Third Phase of Moon was a single voice in a sea of Elizondo supporters to speak out and challenge the narrative being told by Elizondo, publicly supporting Dr. Greer and offering to host the debate between these two UFO powerhouses.
Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. Blake Cousins here. A lot of things going on lately. Dr. Greer's dropping names. He's kind of not very pleased what the narrative is going on within the major media, 60 Minutes. I had about a 2-hour discussion with him last night, and let me tell you, he's unhinged. He's not happy at all with what's going on. This threat, this constant narrative of aliens are a threat. We got to watch out for them. He's not happy at all. So this is what we're doing. Dr. Greer has agreed to come on Third Phase of Moon's platform and discuss and debate with Luis Elizondo, Nick Pope, Jeremy Corbell, including Luis Elizondo's lawyer, Daniel Sheehan. They're all invited to come to a debate that we're going to be having on Third Phase of Moon exclusively in about 2.5 weeks. It's going to take us a little while to organize this major event, discussion, conversation, whatever you call it. Dr. Greer is ready to take them all on. Hey, we don't want to have like a major fight. We just want to have a discussion. Obviously, there's one narrative to the story that's going on in the major media, and they're refusing to give the other side of the narrative. And we're really concerned due to the fact that we believe that there is no such thing as an alien threat. We believe if there is a threat by these unmanned craft, these Tic Tac, these gimbals, this is something involved within military or black ops or private corporation technology. Humans are behind it.
Before we go any further, it is important that you hear this clip from Mr. Elizondo.
But the groundswell that has occurred in the last 4 years on this topic is unprecedented. We have never, ever seen this before on this topic like this. Everybody's engaged. And you know, even the naysayers and the haters on social media, you know, they play a role too. They really do, because you don't ever want an echo chamber. You want contrarians, you want opposing views and alternative, you know, analysis.
Despite his statements that he did not want an echo chamber, the facts show yet another contradiction, as Elizondo declined to meet Dr. Greer in a debate. If Lou truly had no problem addressing haters and naysayers, as he put it, and if Lou truly did not want an echo chamber, then why would he decline to debate Dr. Greer on the subject of an alien threat? And if Lou was truly open to discussing a counterpoint of view other than his own, why does he pre-screen his interviewers and only select channels and personalities that he determines to be friendly to his cause? And here's one more huge contradiction to Lou Elizondo and his statements on the Dr. Greer debate. While speaking about the topic of old UFO personalities and implying Dr. Greer, Lou had this to say.
Yeah, expectation management too, right? They all think that, you know, well, someone's going to come here and deliver us with all the answers. Well, you know, I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not that guy. I never said I was. And, you know, that's the problem with this community. A lot of people have tried to own the narrative. And now that information is coming out that doesn't comport to their narrative, and frankly, they've made a few bucks on it. They've got a choice: either get on board the new train or fight it and resist it with everything they have. And, you know, I think we're seeing that play out to some degree.
In that clip, Lou was chastising and implying that old personalities like Dr. Greer were simply promoting disclosure for money. However, it is important to note that just a few months before making this statement, Lou himself had sold his California home for $260,000 profit, a newfound benefit of his recent UFO celebrity status. And this really makes me wonder, who is in this for the money?
Well, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I have a hard personal problem with anybody charging for services. You know, it's for me. This is not a money-making endeavor. I think we pervert the truth when we do make it a money-making endeavor. I think all sorts of things get introduced into the mix when this becomes about profit. And that's with anybody.
This is just another disturbing contradiction that arises when we ask, who's Lou? After all of the negative attention centered around the alien threat fiasco, Lou and Jeremy Corbell would eventually backpedal and then go on a short damage control media spin cycle attempting to explain that they really did not mean that UFOs and alien life were an inherent threat to humanity. But it was too late, and the damage was done. Shortly thereafter, Lou and Corbell would take the show on the road and begin the lucrative business of attending UFO conventions around the world as paid guest speakers, while Elizondo would continue to sell his story to the mainstream media. Why exactly the international UFO community decided to welcome Mr. Elizondo with open arms, despite the fact that he has no practical UFO experience, is a question that has left many puzzled. Lou continues to go on interviews and live streams and fumble his way through esoteric subjects like psychic vibrations, energy levels, greater consciousness, and extraterrestrial life, all the while looking down at his notes and quoting things like Albert Einstein's theory of relativity and whatnot, just like in this clip.
Yeah, slow motion. Correct. Well, we see this incredible, instantaneous acceleration of hypersonic velocities and these incredible maneuvers. It's all relative, because if you were inside that bubble, inside that craft, and were to be observing the outside environment, we would all appear to be going in slow motion.
Right.
And yet, this is part of Einstein's theory of relativity and whatnot, that both are true. As I've said before, people get into this topic because they think it's neat and it's, wow, neat, you watch Hollywood. But, I've often likened this conversation with somebody to like having a conversation about cancer. In this case, the good news is that the patient's going to be saved, but it's a serious conversation. Look, you're asking a society, you're asking countries, you're asking people writ large to reject an existing paradigm in favor of something new. Now, let's look at the last time this has happened in history that maybe could be correlated to something like this, was with Galileo proving the principles of Copernicus, that the Earth was not the center of the solar system.
This time in 2020 that Lou and his wife purchased their current home in Wyoming. Oddly, the title deed shows a $459,000 commercial loan that was due in a year. A search of public records in Wyoming failed to show a business in that state for Mr. and Mrs. Elizondo. And so I have to question what sort of a loan this was that purchased this home, as it was not a VA loan or a conventional mortgage. And one would think that a commercial loan would be linked to a business. And of course, we can only speculate as to why they chose Wyoming to move to. Perhaps it has something to do with this 2016 article that shows that Lockheed Martin is in talks to move to the state. Or maybe this 2020 article stating that large portions of the defense industry are also considering a move to the area as well. I guess all of these will have to be added to the never-ending list of contradictions and unanswered questions that have arisen when we ask ourselves, who's Lou? And here's a few more contradictions that would pop up as Lou would continue to make his rounds on the livestream circuit. Listen to these next couple of clips where Lou is talking about exactly how the 3 pieces of footage he got declassified ended up at TTSA.
The Department of Defense made the decision to release them. Through the Department of Defense DOPSR process, approved the release for exactly the reason why the request was made. So it was completely on the up and up.
ATIP leaked the videos. Okay, first of all, let's go into a quick legal definition of quote-unquote leaking. Leaking means you take classified information and you provide it in an unauthorized manner.
Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, managed to obtain the tapes from the Pentagon.
I received the videos, the now famous videos in the Pentagon parking lot from a Defense Department official.
This is a case where somebody bent the rules a little bit.
That's a leak. That is not the case. First of all, these videos went through a proper classification review process. The documentation at some point will probably come out. I'm not going to provide it. That's not my job. You want it? Get it from the government. They released it. They authorized, let me get this right. They authorized the release of those videos, and they did it in writing. But no one leaked these videos. If that was the case, I would be in an orange jumpsuit right now, and I do not look good in orange. So believe me.
Somebody bent the rules a little bit.
The problem with Lou's statements here is that the Pentagon has clearly stated that the videos were released illegally, as they had not followed the proper procedures for the release of information. And furthermore, they state here that the only reason that the people involved in the leak are not wearing orange, as Lou put it.
No one leaked these videos. If that was the case, I would be in an orange jumpsuit right now, and I do not look good in orange. So believe me.
Is because the Navy has not initiated a formal investigation into the illegal release of the videos. Now, why do you suppose that the U.S. Navy would not investigate a leak like this? The only answer that I could come up with was that the U.S. Navy already knows who leaked the videos, and they are afraid to investigate and prosecute them, despite the fact that this person has admitted to committing the crime on national television.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, managed to obtain the tapes from the Pentagon and chose the New York Times to break the story.
I received the videos, the now famous videos in the Pentagon parking lot from a Defense Department official. I still have the originals in the packaging.
This is a case where somebody bent the rules a little bit, and they did so for the larger good, and we're absolutely all better off because of it.
Christopher Mellon is the great-great-grandson of Thomas Mellon, an American businessman and judge who founded Mellon Bank of Pittsburgh. Christopher's grandfather, William Mellon, was co-founder of Gulf Oil, and Christopher himself was active in both the Clinton and Bush administrations, acting as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense and as the staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee. It seems like Chris Mellon is extremely wealthy and politically well-connected. Apparently, Christopher Mellon and Lou Elizondo have become attached by a chain at the neck at some point, as they both joined TTSA at the same time, they both quit TTSA at the same time, and then they both recently joined Avi Loeb at Harvard's Galileo project together. And so it seems like the Elizondo-Mellon partnership will not be going away anytime soon. I guess it would also be monumentally hard to indict someone like Christopher Mellon, even with ironclad evidence. Someone with the massive amount of money and political power that Christopher and his family wield could make life extremely miserable for some mid-level prosecutor or investigator from the Pentagon who decided to rock the boat by formally investigating the matter and not just letting it go away. But it's a moot point anyways, because even if the proper channels had been followed for the release of the videos, this second email from the Pentagon spokesperson clearly shows that TTSA, as a so-called industry partner, would not have been allowed to release the videos anyways, as, quote, only an official government office can release official government information to the public. An industry partner would not be cleared to release the videos directly to the public themselves, end quote. So it certainly appears that the videos were indeed leaked to the TTSA illegally, and that the only reason that no charges were filed was because no investigation was made. Most likely because the whole conspiracy was sheltered under the Mellon family political umbrella. And I say conspiracy because that is exactly what appearances suggest. It looks like a group of at least 3 individuals conspired to commit an illegal act, and at least one of them, Lou, was working for the DoD at the time and an active member of the military. I can simply come up with no other explanation that fits the facts, except that Lou Elizondo conspired to declassify the footage and possibly also to hand the footage over to Mellon anonymously. Meanwhile, Christopher Mellon conspired to remove the videos from the Pentagon and to deliver them to the TTSA. Meanwhile, Tom DeLonge conspired to use the videos to promote to the Stars Academy, and possibly even George Knapp conspired to report on it all in the mainstream media in a favorable light and to call the whole thing UFOs.
A secret Pentagon program to study unknown aerial objects, otherwise known as UFOs.
What about those UFO videos? Well, remember the UFO videos?
UFOs, unknown technology.
UFO study. UFOs.
Oh, it's always so fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, George.
This whole conspiracy was motivated by an agenda of profit and was most likely illegal. All of these, too, will be added to the list of contradictions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? So, where is Lou today? Well, according to this next clip, apparently sometime in 2021, Lou obtained employment with some form of a company that requires a security clearance from the Pentagon. One can only assume that that is some sort of a defense industry position, as they are the only ones that require this type of clearance for employment.
6 months ago, on an interview with Lou Jimenez over at the Unidentified Celebrity Reviews, he revealed that I'm a government contractor. And at that time, you said that's all I'm prepared to say at this time. Some time has passed. Can you give us any additional clarification? Are you government contracting directly for the government or someone in a particular industry?
I really can't. I have to be mindful of the privacy of the company I work for and the rules and responsibilities and the duties.
You don't have to name the company. It's just
well, let's just say it's synergistic to my previous efforts. And I'll leave it at that.
Interesting. Cool. Well, it's a little bit soft. At least we know you're not directly going for the government. You're working for a company now. So that gives us some clarity to a degree. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Not meaning to give you.
One thing you said before, though, Lou, is that everything you do is for the benefit of the American people. And that's who you work for at the end of the day. So
absolutely.
Even working for a private contractor, you're still advancing the narrative of what's best for the American people.
100%, Rob. 100%. And I can tell you too, same with the people that I work with. They're equally committed.
So when Lou is not busy working for some unnamed defense industry company, sometimes you can find him mystifying mainstream journalists with embellished tales that sound like something out of a science fiction movie.
From Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. As he enjoyed his steak tartare,
human beings back together again. And
we're going to do that.
So
we're going to do that.
I try not to get animated too much, but
right.
Lou was even spotted in London recently at GQ magazine's Heroes 2021 event, where he was the center of attention. As a guest speaker, Lou was no doubt comfortable in his role regaling the crowd with stories of UFOs and his soldier days in Afghanistan. However, there is something interesting that I noticed from this recent event. Previous to the event, Lou had made a post on Twitter indicating that his wife was in London with him. And when I saw this photo, I immediately assumed that it was Lou, his wife, and their daughter. I even noticed that the young lady appears to have the facial characteristics of both Lou and this other woman. However, due to privacy concerns for Lou's wife and daughter, I have chosen to censor these features in this documentary. I was a little shocked and confused when the photo named these women as Heather Gray and Emily Thomas. I searched the rest of the GQ Heroes page for any mention of these two women and could find none. A further internet search of the two names and GQ or Elizondo resulted in nothing. I spent quite a bit of time attempting to figure out who these two women were and can find no evidence of a Heather Gray or Emily Thomas that matched these two descriptions anywhere but in this single photograph with Lou Elizondo at the GQ Heroes event in 2021. All of these facts lead me to believe that this photograph is most likely a picture of Lou, Jennifer, and their daughter. But I have to wonder why anyone would lie about their names. The only reason that I could think of to lie about the names would be to protect the identity of Lou's wife and daughter. However, if someone were really worried about protecting another's identity, would it be prudent to have them accompany you to a high-profile media event at an international men's fashion magazine and then have them be photographed? That seems imprudent to me. And so I have to wonder why the milquetoast attempt to hide the names of Lou's wife and daughter when those names are already public information. Why lie when you don't need to? It would seem that here we have just another of the many unanswered questions and contradictions that arise when we ask, who's Lou? Here's a few more of the many contradictions that came up during Lou's live stream appearances online recently.
You know, my intent, my hope with this conversation is simply just to speak the truth and allow people to absorb what this topic means to them. I've never prescribed a narrative to this. I've never prescribed a motivation or an origin.
The I-Team's George Knapp recently sat down with the former intelligence officer.
The conversation is about UFOs.
I've never prescribed a narrative to this.
These are craft under intelligent control, and they're flying with impunity, Tucker, within our airspace.
And in this clip here, it's difficult to tell if Lou is describing the people that he is allegedly fighting against in the Pentagon or the ones that he is working for in the defense industry.
You have, let's say, a couple people that have been working this diligently for a very long time. And you know what? Haven't been briefing Congress. And you know what? Haven't been briefing the Secretary of Defense or the Director of CIA. They've just been kind of running this under the radar for a while. Now, back in the past, it had some potentially some oversight, but now it doesn't. And every time the government has said, for the record, do we have a UFO program? The answer has been no. In fact, it's been crickets. And so we've been reporting to Congress. And now it comes out that, you know what, Joe Schmo, Jane Smith, you guys were running this for the last 20 years, and you didn't have the authority to do it. You weren't reporting to the SAPCO. You weren't reporting to Congress. You weren't reporting to the Department of Defense. You were running an illegal operation. You're going to go to jail.
And in one single online interview, Lou gave 3 different reasons behind his motivations for disclosure.
But I'm not doing this to make friends. I'm doing this for a very deeply personal reason, and it's to tell the truth, tell America what really their tax dollars was paying for and what we found. I do it because I believe in the cause and I believe the people who are part of this effort. Well, Dave, thank you for having the patience. I've spent a career with these hands, destroying people's lives in the name of national security. And I really am trying to spend the last half of my life trying to put human beings back together again.
But in this clip, Lou is clearly implying that his motivations are financially tied to the defense industry.
Company A, Company B. And for whatever reason back in the past, let's say hypothetically, so let me caveat that. Hypothetically, we recover some sort of strange material that falls out of the sky. And these two companies are competing with each other, but Company A looks shiny and pretty. And so we say, you know what, we're going to give this material to Company A to take a look at. You go ahead and tell us what you think, and you can hold on to it for 20, 30 years. Meanwhile, Company B, who's competing with Company A in the same aerospace environment, let's say, for big planes and rockets and whatnot, they go bankrupt because they did not have the unfair competitive advantage that Company A had. Company B is now defunct. 100 people lose their jobs, and Company B now is history, no longer exists. Meanwhile, Company A becomes a multi-billion-dollar, part of the military complex, industrial complex, and is now billions and billions and billions of dollars now in the black. Right, and now it comes out that Well, you know what? Company A did happen to have material, exotic material, and it did give them a fair competitive advantage for 40 years.
And in recent clips, Elizondo has also stated that his previous specialty was declassifying technologies and information for widespread law enforcement use, including the private defense industry.
So the initial intent, John, was to have a unclassified repository, because that was my experience before when I was working in the Department of Defense, was really setting up these special enclaves where you could share very sensitive national level intelligence via what we call a terror line, and getting that information down to a level could be consumable by anybody out there that's, local law enforcement, state authorities, anybody like that. But my point being is that we were trying to create an enclave that allowed us to share this information that came from U.S. government sources to a broader audience and industry. The big boys, Boeings of the world, and the Raytheons, and that's actionable information. But it was super classified, so you have to come up with a mechanism where people who don't necessarily have security clearance can access really, really classified information. So there's a mechanism to do that. So that kind of was my forte for some time. So
who's Lou?
Very, very interesting, guys. So there's about 20 minutes left of that documentary. You guys can go watch a lot of the good stuff's at the end. We just watched about over 2 hours of this on the channel, and I also had Manny on earlier. Not sure if he's still here watching in the background, but we can bring him in if he is. And shows back up. But yeah, I want to wrap this stream up kind of soon because I'm getting tired. It's 1 a.m. here, and my wife wants me to go to bed and stop talking about UFOs. What's up, Manny? This is aged so well. The only thing my wife wants me to re-edit it where you take out that sound effect in the Who's Lou every 10 minutes and change it with something else. Because that was driving her nuts in the background. But yeah, that was the only criticisms I got from it. The rest of she was just like, wow, this is like crazier than I even thought. Because she went to the Lou Elizondo with me. I took her on March 10th to go see Elizondo when he came here to Boston, and she knows very little about UFOs, compared to me. But she was just like, I know more about UFOs than this guy does. Like, interesting what's happened, how they've tried to gain control of that narrative, tried to recapture all that stuff, but and then I really feel like they tried to create a couple other organizations around the UFO tech stuff, but we've really held down that sphere as leaders in
yeah, I mean, Elizondo set up 5 corporations over the last 6 years, like LLCs trying to get in different ways, and now he's with the UAP Disclosure Fund, which God knows where they're getting their money. They're basically what I call an illegal lobbying group, because they're lobbying as a full-time job and they're being paid for it. They should have to divulge who's funding them, but they don't have to do that because they're a nonprofit, not a lobbyist group. Even though they're not doing any nonprofit work, they're just lobbying.
Now, Tim Gallaudet's probably the only one I've seen that I like out of this whole mix. I'm not so sure. I've seen her before, and I don't know too much about her. But then some of these other guys like Lester, he's just an idiot. I've had arguments with him on X, and he just knows nothing. But somehow he's the guy like, talking to Congress and talking to these people.
He's the creator of the UAP caucus. And what is the UAP caucus? Tim Burchett, Luna, it's all those guys. Like, what does that even mean? He's not even a politician. He's like a retired tech guy who, started up a company and sold it, made a bunch of money.
I don't
know what his gig is. Yeah.
I don't know quite his, gig, because he just seems like he knows so little about like he's argued with me about like stuff and just like ignorant to the information, like deliberately. It just seems like I don't know if a lot of them I feel have been really propagandized, or I don't know.
That's the guy right there. So up at the top, that what's his name? Yan Feng. He's the one whose name is on all the paperwork. Like, he's the backbone of it. Now, if somebody wanted to really dig into him and figure out who he is and what his motivation is, he might also be the one who's funding it. I don't know.
But I do know that their directors, all those people on the top, are pulling in some salaries and they're getting paid money. So as you know, like it's either a money pit and or it's somebody's tax write-off. I'm not sure what it is. It's kind of crazy.
I'm trying to see if I recognize. I don't really recognize him because I'm like trying to pick out all the faces of people I met at the conference because he's in San Francisco, but I don't think I saw him out there at the UAP hackathon. That's weird. Why he wouldn't be there if he's about
Well, wasn't Lou supposed to be there too, and he didn't show for some reason? I thought Deep had said that he was going to be there, but maybe not. I could be mistaken.
Deep said who was going to be there?
I thought he said that Lou was going to show up for the hackathon in Frisco, and then
Lou
he never showed
Elizondo?
up. Yeah, I could have swore he did. Maybe I'm wrong, but I could have swore he said that he was going to be there. So I was a little shocked.
Nah, he probably realized I was there with the whole APEC crew and was like, damn it.
Yeah. Well, and then he was in DC supposedly going to do the briefing with Dave Grush in front of in the skiff with those guys too. So maybe he decided to go to that instead. Who knows? And do that whatever that briefing was.
I think he's done, man. And if more people watch hopefully, and it's a long time to do a stream, 4.5 hours and a lot of information that you covered. But man, you nailed out so much about this guy that just doesn't add up to anything but something nefarious and suspicious. And I think that I don't know. I really wish that we can, with all the people that were coming on today that talked about the UFO hate group. Now we have Rojas, Alejandro Rojas, and also Kelly Chase, speaking out about some of their experiences and how they were like scared of even talking about it because of the pressure. And now that the tide's starting to turn, they're really exposing a lot of this. But it brings questions about Chris Mellon's integrity, Lou Elizondo's integrity. Again, anyone associated with these guys is going to be, this company, and if anyone that invested in this, that tied themselves to these individuals, is going to be, and a lot of, they're going to be kicking themselves. They're going to be like, damn it, why did we team with this guy? And you know what? It's just strange how the tides are turning on this. I'm hoping. Because I've got a number of investors who've venture capitalists and stuff that sat on the open mics and other discussions with the all propulsion groups, and have actually expressed interest and contacted certain members of the groups with offers for funding, and I've gotten a lot of people in our research community hooked up with venture capitalists and investors and funding. So it's been, things are moving on that front, and to think that there's no viable technology or proof of concept is a lie. It's just you're not paying attention to the information sphere and how this is evolving and what's going on and who's involved with this and how big it really is. And it's a shame that these people with maybe possibly good intentions. I don't know anything about this Yuan individual, and I believe I know a lot of people with really good intention. I know a guy from MIT that was privy to some of this technology and stuff, and he thought that TTSA was going to be the real deal, and he invested his life savings in the company. Right when that came out, thinking that this pays off, man. This is going to be the biggest thing ever, and man, he's like so butthurt about it.
Because every penny that went into the stock went into Tom DeLonge's pocket. If you watch my Who's TTSA, which is right underneath Who's Lou on the webpage, the last 30 minutes of that is just a breakdown of all the public filings from the SEC filings that TTSA made, and it shows how Tom just bled every penny that went into their put it right into his pocket. Yeah, it's really sad, and I feel bad for it. There's other people too in our community who I know that bought those TTSA stocks because they believed in the mission, but also because they thought that they were going to get rich off it too. And they might as well have just taken a match to their money. Sadly, they're never going to get any of that back. And even if it ever does post profits, because of the way that he's diluted the stock value by giving himself stocks, all the profits, the dividends would go right back to Tom DeLonge as well. It's just it's a scam top to bottom. In fact, I had said this in the chat earlier. There was a congresswoman by the name of Joyce Beatty who was doing speech on Capitol Hill about why the Regulation A+ stock program needs to be revamped. And she used TTSA as an example as why the laws need to be changed, basically, that these people should not be ripping off investors. Go ahead. Sorry. What was that?
Manny, you're on Twitter and you're obviously the website Who's Lou, where people can find that documentary as well as Who's TTSA. I'd like to thank you for making and taking your time to put it into that, making that documentary, and letting me share that on the channel, and then also joining us tonight to wake up more people about how fucked up this situation really is. I think